Right. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into looking at a pretty controversial figure
Yeah.
through the lens of the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
And we are talking about Osho
Yes.
and his connection to the social eight.
Specifically the social eight,
Yeah.
right? Because what makes that so interesting is that we're not looking at just any eights, right?
Right.
This subtype really kind of flips the script on what we typically think of when we think about an eight's drive for power.
Right.
It becomes less about personal dominance
Right.
and more about using that strength to uplift others
Yeah.
and to challenge systems that they see as unjust or unequal.
Absolutely. And I think, when we think about Osho's life, that really resonates.
Totally.
Right. He was constantly pushing back against norms,
Yes.
rejecting traditional religious structures,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately creating his own community, which was Rajneeshpuram.
Yeah, and that's actually a key point, is that this drive to kind of build new systems, to create alternative ways of living, that's kind of like a hallmark of the social eight.
Yeah.
They're not content with just fitting into existing structures, especially if those structures feel limiting,
Right.
oppressive.
Yeah.
They really want to reshape the world around them.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about tearing things down, though.
Right.
Like, he had this really unique approach to spirituality,
Yes.
where he kind of blended it with a celebration of life's pleasures,
Mm-hmm.
which definitely goes against, the more traditional renunciatory paths.
Yeah, that's where this concept of spiritual hedonism comes in. And it's fascinating how he tied this to personal liberation.
Yeah.
He believed that by fully embracing life, including its joys and its sensual experiences,
Right.
that we could actually achieve a deeper level of spiritual awareness.
Yeah.
And he saw pleasure as a path to enlightenment,
Yeah.
not a distraction from it.
Right. And he really, emphasized this idea of integrating the Zorba
Yes.
with the Buddha.
Zorba the Buddha is like
Yeah.
this beautiful concept that he uses
Yeah.
that kind of speaks volumes about how the social eight archetype really challenges these conventional dichotomies we often create in society.
Yeah.
They don't see things as black and white, good or bad,
Right.
They want to embrace the fullness of human experience.
Yeah.
And use that to fuel their vision for a better world.
So we've got this picture, right, like emerging of this rebellious leader,
Yeah.
this community builder,
Yeah.
and a spiritual innovator,
Totally.
all wrapped up in this social eight energy.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where I think it gets even more interesting,
Okay.
is that our sources draw a direct parallel between Osho
Yeah.
and another famous figure known for defying convention, Socrates.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and what's so striking is that, despite living in completely different time periods and cultures, right?
Absolutely.
Both Osho and Socrates embodied this social eight archetype. So
Yeah.
clearly,
It's so true.
right, they were both seen as rebels who questioned authority, challenged conventional wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and built communities around their ideas.
Yeah.
Like so many similarities.
And both faced significant backlash for their unconventional approaches.
Oh, yeah.
Accusations of corrupting the youth,
Mm-hmm.
legal battles, even being labeled as dangerous
Totally.
by the powers that be.
Yeah, it's like they were both living out this
Yeah.
archetypal journey of
Yeah.
the social eight.
It's really true.
It's so fascinating. It makes you wonder how these patterns repeat throughout history.
Yeah.
Right, and it really speaks to the power of the Enneagram as a tool for understanding human nature,
Yeah.
not just on an individual level, but also on a societal and historical scale.
It's true.
Like, we can see these archetypes playing out
Yeah.
across time.
Okay, so we've touched on this idea
Yeah.
of the social antisocial paradox,
Hmm.
but I think we need to unpack that
Yeah.
a bit more because it's such a key aspect
Okay.
of the social eight. And it seems so contradictory on the surface,
Right.
but when you look at his life,
Mm-hmm.
it makes perfect sense.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, he was incredibly social in the sense of being this leader who drew thousands to his movement.
yeah,
He had this magnetic personality that inspired devotion
right,
and a desire to be a part of something bigger than oneself.
totally.
But he was also antisocial in that he was completely against established structures and norms.
Absolutely.
He refused to play by the rules
Yeah.
of traditional religion
Right.
or societal expectations.
It's true. And even within his own communes, right?
Right.
There was that same push and pull.
Yeah.
He created a framework,
Mhm.
a structure,
Yeah.
but one that encouraged individual expression,
Totally.
questioning and breaking free from limitations.
Yes. And that seems to be like a core tension within the social eight, is this desire to kind of protect and guide, but also to empower individuals to forge their own path.
Yeah.
It's like they're constantly challenging the boundaries between individuality and community, trying to find that balance between personal liberation and collective responsibility.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And one that I think we'll see play out even more as we kind of delve deeper into his life and legacy.
For sure.
In the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely.
So stay tuned.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things that keeps coming up for me as we're exploring Osho is this idea of questioning authority.
Oh, absolutely.
It seems to be so like woven into the very fabric of the social eight, almost like a driving force.
Yeah, that resistance to being controlled or dominated is so deeply ingrained in the social eight psyche.
Yeah.
They just see right through any attempts to manipulate or limit their freedom, and they have zero tolerance for injustice, especially when it's directed at themselves or those they care about.
And yet, like we've been talking about, there's this paradox where social eights often end up creating their own systems of authority.
Right.
How do we reconcile that with their aversion to control?
It's a complex dance, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's not so much that they want to control others in the traditional sense.
Right.
It's more about creating a space where their vision for a better world can flourish.
Okay.
They want to establish a framework where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, but on their own terms, not by adhering to some external set of rules that feel limiting or arbitrary.
So it's less about imposing their will.
Yeah.
And more about creating an environment where people can step into their own power.
Exactly.
Which I guess in a way is still a form of influence, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's a tension that social eights often grapple with.
Yeah.
Is how to balance their desire for individual freedom with the need for some form of structure or guidance.
Right.
They might even struggle with their own internal authority. Questioning, their own motivations and the potential for their power to be misused.
And speaking of misuse of power, right? We can't shy away from the criticisms that were leveled at Osho and his movement.
Yeah.
Right? There were accusations of cult-like practices.
Of course.
Financial improprieties, even criminal activity.
Right.
How do we reconcile these darker aspects with our exploration of the social eight archetype?
It's a crucial point to address because no Enneagram type is inherently good or bad.
Right.
Each type has its shadows, its potential for both healthy and unhealthy expression, and the social eight with its intensity, its strong convictions, and its willingness to challenge the status quo can definitely slip into more destructive patterns if they're not careful.
So what might those unhealthy patterns look like for a social eight?
Well, for starters, that desire for control can become excessive, even tyrannical.
Okay.
They might start to demand unquestioning loyalty from those around them, becoming domineering and intolerant of any dissent.
Right.
That protective instinct can morph into a need to control others for their own good, even if it means trampling on their individual autonomy.
And that fearlessness that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That ability to kind of face challenges head on could potentially become reckless.
Exactly. They might take unnecessary risks, engage in confrontations that escalate unnecessarily, or become so fixated on their vision that they fail to see the potential negative consequences of their actions.
Right.
It's like a runaway train.
Yeah.
Powerful, unstoppable,
yeah,
but potentially headed for disaster.
So it's not just about understanding the strengths of the social eights, but also recognizing those potential pitfalls.
Totally.
Those shadows that can emerge.
A shadow side.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're not kept in check.
Absolutely.
And that's where self-awareness becomes paramount for social aids. They need to cultivate a deep understanding of their own motivations, their triggers, and their tendencies, so they can use their power responsibly and ethically.
Right.
It's a journey of constantly questioning themselves, checking their impulses, and being willing to course correct when necessary.
It's almost like they need to become their own internal authority figure.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
They need to be their own moral compass.
Yeah.
Guiding themselves towards a path that aligns with their values of justice, fairness, and empowerment.
Yeah.
Not just for themselves, but for everyone.
You know, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that even though Osho was a spiritual leader, he was also a product of his time.
Yeah.
And his own personal history.
Of course.
Right. He was born in India.
Yes.
A country with a long tradition of spiritual seeking, but also a history of a social hierarchy and power struggles.
Right.
And he lived through a period of immense change and upheaval, both in India and globally.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
We can't analyze someone like Osho in a vacuum.
Right.
His context, his background, his experiences, all of that shaped who he became. And how he expressed his social 8 energy.
Right.
And it reminds us that even the most unconventional figures, the most rebellious leaders, are still products of their environment, influenced by the systems they're trying to change.
It's a humbling reminder
Yeah.
that we're all part of a larger web of interconnectedness.
Absolutely.
And even as we strive for personal liberation and social transformation, we're still carrying the imprints of our past, our culture, our collective experiences.
And those imprints can inform our strengths, our weaknesses, and our blind spots.
Right.
It's a lifelong process of unpacking those influences, understanding how they've shaped us, and making conscious choices about how we want to move forward.
Okay, so we've explored the shadows and the complexities of the social 8. But let's not forget the incredible power and potential of this archetype.
Yes.
Right? Osho's life, despite its controversies, is a testament to that.
Totally.
Right.
Think about the sheer force of will it took to build a community from scratch, to challenge deeply ingrained societal norms, to inspire thousands of people to question everything they thought they knew.
Right.
That's social. Energy in action.
It's powerful.
Bold, audacious, and utterly transformative.
And even if we don't agree with all of his methods or conclusions, there's something undeniably captivating about his willingness to push boundaries, to disrupt the status quo, and to create a space for radical personal and collective growth.
He embodies that dare to be different spirit that resonates with so many people, especially those who feel stifled by conventional expectations or societal constraints.
Right.
He reminds us that it's okay to question authority, to challenge the rules, and to forge our own paths, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way.
I think what's really striking is that Osho's legacy continues to inspire debate and discussion, even decades after his death. Right? His teachings are still relevant today, challenging us to think critically about our own beliefs, our relationship with power, and our vision for a more just and liberated world.
And that's the true mark of a revolutionary figure.
Right.
Someone who shakes things up so profoundly that their impact continues to ripple through generations. It's a legacy that invites us to grapple with complex questions, to examine our own assumptions, and to continue the conversation about how we can create a world that honors both individual freedom and collective responsibility.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious to explore what lasting lessons we can glean from Osho's life. Both in terms of understanding the social 8 archetype and in navigating our own journeys of personal and societal transformation.
I love that.
So we spent a lot of time unpacking the complexities of the social 8, using Osho's life as a lens. Now, I'm really curious to hear your take on his lasting impact. Like, what do you think?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because even decades after his death, Osho remains a controversial figure.
Right.
But I think that in itself speaks to his legacy. You know, he wasn't afraid to provoke, to challenge conventions, to spark debate. And that kind of disruption often leaves a lasting mark.
I think for a lot of people, his teachings offer a sense of liberation, particularly for those who feel disillusioned with traditional structures or societal expectations. Like, he really encouraged this radical approach to self-discovery and spiritual exploration, one that embraces individuality and challenges the status quo.
And that's where I think we can find some truly valuable insights. Osho's life, viewed through the lens of the social 8, really prompts us to examine our own relationship with authority, with societal norms, and ultimately with our own inner power.
It's like he's asking us, what are you willing to question? What are you willing to fight for?
Exactly.
And I think those are incredibly potent questions regardless of our Enneagram type.
Absolutely. But for those who identify as 8s, especially social 8s, I think Osho's story offers a particularly powerful challenge. It's a reminder of the immense responsibility that comes with strength and influence, and the potential pitfalls that can arise when that power is misused.
We talked about the shadows of the social eight earlier.
Yes.
Right? The tendencies towards control, domination, and recklessness.
Yeah.
Osho's life certainly showcased those darker aspects.
Oh, sure.
But it also highlighted the incredible potential for positive change when those tendencies are channeled effectively.
Right. He showed us that the same energy that can fuel destructive patterns can also be harnessed to challenge injustice, to empower others, and to create a more equitable and fulfilling world. It all comes down to awareness and intention, and a willingness to hold ourselves accountable to a higher purpose.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering what you would say to someone who's intrigued by Osho's ideas, but also wary of the controversies surrounding him.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to approach his work with a critical eye.
Right.
Don't take everything he said as gospel truth.
Right.
Question his methods, challenge his conclusions, and see what resonates with you personally.
It's about taking what's useful and leaving the rest behind.
Exactly.
Using his story as a springboard for our own exploration rather than blindly following his path.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of the Enneagram.
Yeah.
It's a tool for self-discovery, not a set of rigid rules or doctrines.
Right.
It helps us understand our own patterns, our strengths or weaknesses, and the unique ways we interact with the world.
So ultimately, it's about using these insights to become more conscious, more compassionate, and more empowered individuals.
Yeah.
And to remember that the journey of personal growth is often messy, unconventional, and full of contradictions.
Right.
There's no one right way to do it. And sometimes the greatest lessons come from those who dare to challenge the status quo.
Right.
Even if they stumble along the way.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating exploration of Osho and the social eight.
Absolutely.
I think we both learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners have too.
It's been a pleasure.
So until next time.
And remember, the journey of self-discovery doesn't end here.
That's right.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.